Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Dr. Hafaz Furqani. I'm currently visiting scholar at Islamic Research and Training Institute, IRTI, IDB. I am a researcher at International Syariah Research Academy for Islamic Finance, ISRA, Malaysia. I am also a lecturer at the Faculty of Islamic Economics and Business, State Islamic University, Ar-Raniri, Banda Aceh, Indonesia. The topic of my presentations today is about the microfoundations of Islamic economics, issues and core values. This is chapter 7 and 8 of the books that is going to be published by IRTI and IUM Press. The title of the book is The Foundations of Islamic Economics. It is actually a basics books, principles in Islamic economics books for undergraduate students. It consists of 11 chapters. Chapter 1 is on the introductions to Islamic economics. Chapter 2, economics in the Islamic worldview. And chapter 3 is about the definition of Islamic economics. Chapter 4 is about the subject matter of Islamic economics. Chapter 5 is the methodology of Islamic economics. Chapter 6 is on the theory appraisals in Islamic economics. Chapter 7 is the topics that we are going to discuss today. It's about the microfoundation of Islamic economics, the issues. And chapter 8 is the microfoundation of Islamic economics, the core values. Chapter 9, 10 and 11 is about the consumptions, productions, distribution in Islamic economics. And chapter 12 is the conclusions. The topics, the agenda for our discussion is about two issues in the microfoundation of Islamic economics. We are trying to explain what are the issues in the microfoundation of Islamic economics, how scholars come up with the core values in the microfoundation of Islamic economics. The microfoundations is about how scholars are perceiving the nature of economic agents. In the case of conventional economics, we have what is called as homo economicus, or economic agents. It is basically the first place of building up the ethical economic order as a whole, and it is also the basis for theorizing about the aggregate economy later on. So there is a micro and macro connections whereby to achieve certain macroeconomic goals, we need to influence the behavior of individuals at the lower levels. So that's why discussing the microfoundations is very important, so that we can have a clear objective in our macroeconomics visions later on. Nevertheless, we have to also take some notes that talking about the microfoundations is not about aggregations in the strict sense, in the sense that society is not only composites of individuals in the aggregate sense, in the strict sense, but it is actually composites of individuals in dynamics, interactive, heterogeneous agents in the economy. This is important so that we can have an appropriate policy prescriptions later on at the macroeconomic level. And then secondly, in order to have a successful macroeconomic policy, we need to influence the behavior of the individual economic agents at the lower level. And this, the ethical transformations in an economic systems will start basically from the lower level, which is the individual economic agents. In the micro foundations of economics, we discuss the nature of individuals' economic agents. What will be his characteristics? What will be his expected behavior? And what will be the goals in his economic pursuits? Philosophers of economics have come up with the assumptions on the nature of individual behavior, in which later on these assumptions becomes the doctrine in economics. And that assumption is, they have put it in a man which is called as Homo economicus, or economic man. Homo economic man is actually constructed from certain visions and worldview attached to the philosophers of economics. So basically its conception is not a value-free enterprise. There is certain values attached to that nature of human being, and that values becomes our critical points to when we are trying to develop our Islamic economic man in the case of Islamic economics. In the Islamic economics, scholars also have tried to develop certain assumptions on the behavior of individual economic agents, and it is and that human, that type of individual is called as Homo Islamicus, or Islamic man, or some says it as Islamic economic man. But there are differences among the scholars, whereby some scholars argue that actually there is no need to call or to specify the type of man in Islamic economics. There is no need for an Islamic man. They are preferring for a more substantial approach, whereby we try to discuss the nature of man without any Islamic prefix. This is because it will lead us to restrictions, and it will make our Islamic economic disciplines becomes exclusive disciplines, or restricted disciplines. The other approach argued that it is also important to have a specific man in Islamic economics, and that man can be called as Islamic man, or Homo Islamicus. The purpose is to have identifications when we develop our disciplines of Islamic economics. It is scientifically justified because the values later on is clearly targeted to that Islamic man, and later on we can have a measure. We can measure in terms of the behavior and observe the behavior of that man in practice. And in fact, if we refer back to the development of disciplines in conventional economics, currently they are also come up with various types of men that try to challenge the nature and the behavior of economic men. So in this case, we have, for example, Homo institutional economicus, Homo sociologicus, or Homo politicus, or even they try to also argue for Homo complexicus, that try to combine all this nature, all these characteristics of the behavior of individuals, of human beings. But I think the most important question is that how we can come up with the nature, the true nature of a man in Islam, and who is that Islamic man. To answer that questions, we have to refer back to the Quran, to our primary sources. In this case, the Quran describes the nature of man in 4 ways. First, the Quran describes the process of human creations, how human being has been created. He has an earthly component and he has divinely components. This will influence the nature of human being. Secondly, the Quran also describes the reason d'etre, or why human being has been created. For what purpose is his creations? This will also influence his behavior. And thirdly, the Quran describes about the nature of human self, whereby a human has dual nature, dual identity. He tends to go to positive aspects on his self. He also tends to go to the negative aspect of his self. And the Quran is very explicit that human being has to strive to go to the positive dimensions of his self, whereby he can gain later on the true nature of human self, and that is described as insan kamil. And the Quran also describe human existence in realities, that human being is not created, is not the only creations created by God. Human being has been created with the other realities, with the animals, with the other God's creations, with the universe. This created that each creation has their own right and responsibility, and this will also influence the behavior of human being. In the case of Islamic economics, we have to try to develop a comprehensive perspective on the nature of human being, so that we are not overlooking or underlooking his true nature, as in the case of conventional economics, whereby they have reduced the nature of human beings into individual self and into the material dimensions per se. And in the case of Islamic economics, we also have to try to come up with a holistic perspective of human nature, whereby we are talking not about his relationship with himself only, but also his relationship with God, for example, with the society and with nature, and so that we can promote him we can promote a true well-being for human being. And another thing that we have also should note in the discussion of microfoundation of Islamic economic is that we try to do a linguistic turn, so that we can have a paradigm shift in the discussions of the nature or the behavior of economic agent in Islamic economics. We have to try to do two things. The first is we have to reinterpret and redefine the conventional key terminologies attached to the nature of individuals. For example, the concept of self-interest, the concept of utility, the concept of rationality, to explain the nature of economic agents. We have to reinterpret and redefine them in Islamic perspective. The second approach is that we have also tried to reintroduce the Islamic or Arabic key terminologies that have been proposed in our Islamic intellectual heritage, in the Turas or even in the Quran, because those concepts of interest, for example, utility, rationality, is not able to capture the whole dimensions that we have discussed just now about the nature of human beings. So in this case, we have to try to look back our own heritage. Do we have concepts that can better explain the nature of human being in Islam? And this is normal in the case of development of new disciplines, as Gilbreth, for example, argued that if we are successful in coming up with new assumptions and then new terminologies, then new paradigms is possible in Islamic economics. And secondly, language or key terminologies is developed within a certain context, within a certain worldview. So for utility, it is, for example, or rationality, for example, self-interest, for example, is developed within the context of Western society, in the context of capitalist economic settings, when they try to observe the true nature of human being. So that term, that concept, that terminologies might be inadequate when we put it in the Islamic context, in the Islamic economic context. So the question is, do we have another concepts or another key terminologies that can better explain the nature of human being in Islamic economics? So in the second part, we try to discuss that core values in Islamic economics, the microfoundation of Islamic economics. So there are three key terminologies that will be discussed. The first is self-interest. So we discuss the concept of hukuk to replace the concept of self-interest as the basis of human behavior. We also discussed the concept of maslahah to replace the concept of utility in explaining the motive of economic agents. We also discussed the concept of taqwa to replace the concept of rationality that will be the cardinal virtue of economic agent. So direct comparisons will be made later on. The first is about self-interest, the basis of human behavior. It is argued that Edgeworth, for example, argued that the first principles of economics is that every agent is actuated only self-interest. Eric Fromm also described that individual, his functions and aim in economics can be nothing else than that of any other things to preserve himself and to persevere in his existence. So self-interest has been developed as the concepts whereby to explain the nature of individuals, whereby individual is motivated to act on his own self-interest and for his self-benefit. These become the major key terminologies in conventional economics. But in the discourse, we also found the critics to these concepts. Scholars have argued that the concept is actually simplistic, narrow, inadequate to explain the real behavior of human beings. Some individuals, they are also acting on the basis of other interests, on the basis of society interests, which is the bigger interest. So that concept of self-interest is also describe human being as a half persons acting on his self-interest basis, as if he is now acting in a social vacuum or spiritual vacuums. Amartya Sen described that as an immoral being, since this motive puts more emphasis on the inner self rather than other self. Hence might recede the values such as sympathy or commitments. But the concept of self-interest itself seems to be neutral, and that's why some Islamic economists accept the concept of self-interest as something which is natural, provided that it has been enlightened in the Islamic forms, in the Islamic principles, whereby while individual is motivating on the basis of self-interest, but at the same time he is also concerned with the ethics, with the values, with the other interests, with the society interests. So for some Islamic economics, they maintain the concept of self-interest with modifications with Islamic principles. But the question is that, do we have other concepts that can explain the concept of self-interest? Because the questions remain with why the emphasis is on self-interest rather than other interests. So if we refer back to our intellectual heritage, we found the concept of haq, or in plural form as hukuk, that can explain, that can replace the concept of self-interest. In Islamic intellectual traditions, hukuk argues that every realities, every existence has its own right and responsibility, has its own haq or hukuk. We in fact have what it is called as hukukullah, or hukukul ibad, or hukukul insan, human right. And in hukukul insan, it is divided further into hukukul fardi and hukukul jama'ah, the individual's haq and the society's haq. And also we have hukukul alam, the other creation also have their own haq. Animal have their own haq. And in the Quran it is mentioned that wa'ati zil qurba haqqahu wal miskina wa ibn sabil. It is also mentioned that wa fi amwalihim haqqun ma'lum lis-sa'ili wal mahrum. And in your wealth, in their wealth, there is a right of others that you should deliver. So in our own wealth, there is a right of others. There is a claim from others in our wealth that we should deliver. So what is right for other individuals become our obligations to deliver. The concept of haq or hukuk is the meaning of haq or hukuk is that claim, rights, responsibilities, and it take into account the other interests, the multiple interests. It's not only recognize self-interest, but also other interests, society's interests, animal interests, for example, animals' right. So this is discussed in the concept of hukuk that would set a balanced perspective of individuals, society, and nature interests. If we compare the concept of self-interest and hukuk, we found that in the concept of self-interest is it has an atomistic self-view, while in the concept of hukuk, it is a holistic self-view. In the concept of self-interest, all realities are reduced at the level of individuals. An individual is having one single identity. The concept is derived from the physics, whereby human being is being treated as the center of gravity, whereby all other realities has been reduced into single identities, which is human being. So now he becomes the center. All other realities, society, even God, are acting for the basis for individual self-interest. In the concept of hukuk, we recognize all realities have their own rights. So individual is actually within the realities. He is a microcosmos, alam saghir, in a bigger cosmos, alam kabir. Individual is having dual identities, his self-being and social beings. And those interests should be pursued simultaneously. In self-interest, it is a unitary perspective. There is no dynamics behavior in the concept of self-interest. Individual and society are two different realities, are two different things, and they are mutually exclusive. In the case of hukuk, since we recognize all interests, then individual and society are having mutually inclusive. Individual has a right to the society. Society also has right to the individual. And then in terms of choice, making choice, decisions, the concept of self-interest is static, and the concept of hukuk, it recognizes a dynamic process of making choice. This is because in the case of self-interest, choice will be made based on the benefit of an individuals. So the other things becomes externalities. In the case of hukuk, individual, when he is going to make a choice, should consider other realities, other interests of realities. We have to take into account the hukuk of society. We have to take into account the hukuk of universe and nature. Individual cannot just consider his own self-interest. The second principles that we are going to compare is the concept of maslahah and utility, whereby the motive of economic agent in conventional economic is to maximize utility. In the case of Islamic economics, an individual economic agent wants to maximize the maslahah. And maslahah is a broader concept than utility. But we have to take notes here that maximization per se is not un-Islamic. We can maintain the concept of maximizations, provided we clarify three things. The first is what to be maximized, how to maximize, and for what purpose is the maximizations. What is the objective in our maximizations? So utility in this case is not our objective because of some shortcoming in the concepts. And in fact, maslahah will be our objective in the maximizations. Utility, according to Jeremy Bentham, is that all human behavior was motivated by search for pleasure and avoidance of pain. Concept of utility is developed to reflect that pleasure and pain principles. But since the concept is developed within the worldview of materialistic and secularistic worldview, then pleasure and pain is measured at the physicals, sensuals, and materials dimensions. Nevertheless, utility is a generic and natural concepts, whereby any other things, any other goals can be put in the concept of utility. For example, we are drinking milk is to get maximized utility. The same like drinking wine, for example, is also we want to gain, for some persons, they want to gain his utility maximizations. So that's why for Islamic economists, they argue to maintain the concept of utility, but with modifications to include the Islamic principles and values, and they call it as Islamic utility. So in this case, they put the dimensions of akhirah, the hereafter, for example, whereby now we have a longer time of horizons, not only to gain satisfaction in this world, but also in the hereafter. They also concerns with the concept of ethics and values. But again, the question is that, do we have other concepts that can explain better the goals of individuals in his effort of maximizations? So in this case, we argued for the concept of maslahah. Maslahah will talk about the benefits and harms. It is not only about pain and pleasure. It is more than that. What is benefits and harms? Because in Islamic case, for example, fasting, for example, it might pain us. It might give us pain because we have to restrain ourselves from eating and drinking until the Maghrib. But it brings us benefits. It brings us maslahah. Drinking wine, for example, it may give us pleasure, but in fact, it will also harm us. So in this case, our benchmark is benefits and harms, not pain and pleasure.